One day, Thomas was sitting in the goods dock at Farquhar. He was resting between trains and listening to the buzzing of planes overhead. As he was about to go to sleep, he saw someone walking up to him. "Hello," said Thomas. "Who are you?" "I'm Wilbert, but you can call me the Thin Clergyman if you like," said the man. "Thank you for a lovely ride." Thomas smiled, feeling very proud. "It's my honour. My branch line is special after all." The Thin Clergyman was intrigued. "I should like to hear how you got it. I write books, you see. Books for children." Thomas was very impressed. "Well," he wheezed, "I'll happily tell you how I got it. That will make a very good story. But we must start at the beginning. It's the proper thing to do." The Thin Clergyman agreed and took a small notebook out of his pocket. He opened it up and waited for Thomas to start. Thomas paused, thinking of the best place to begin telling all about it. "I was station pilot at Knapford for some time. I proved myself very useful there and helped all the big engines. You know of Gordon, of course. It is somewhat hard not to know of him. I used to bring all his trains to him because he could never fetch them himself, poor thing. A bit long in the boiler by the time I came along, you know." "Was he really?" "Indeed. I used to bring all the engines their trains. There was only Henry and Gordon back then, you see. And with Gordon getting on poorly and poor Henry being ill, they relied on me. They wouldn't have managed otherwise. I remember one day when Gordon woke up very late and had to rush to his coaches at the station. 'Hurry up, you,' I told him. He grumbled something or other, and it was all soon right. When it was time to go, I had to give him a push to help him start. The poor engine must have been very tired indeed, because I had to push him all the way to the next station." Thomas watched as the Thin Clergyman wrote everything down in his book. "And then what?" "I was turned around and went back to the big station to organise other trains. Henry was very happy to see me. I believe the poor engine nearly cried with relief." The Thin Clergyman couldn't help but laugh. "Was that the only adventure?" "Oh, goodness, no," said Thomas with feeling. "There were more. You know how it is with young engines full of their own ideas. I was much the same." The Thin Clergyman nodded and readied his notebook and pen. "I want to see the world," I said. Gordon and Henry said I was silly, but Edward offered me his goods train. Edward has always been far kinder than the other two. He understood my case at once. We asked our drivers and they said yes, so off I went. It was terribly exciting being out on the open line for the first time. The silly trucks tried a small trick, but they soon learned not to play tricks with me. I handled them so well, the fat controller, who was the fat director back then, sent me to work with Edward to manage trucks. He must have been very impressed with me. The Thin Clergyman carried on writing in his little book. "And is that how you got your branch line?" "No," replied Thomas. "I was rewarded with it after I rescued James from a nasty crash. I managed it brilliantly. No one could have done a better job." Thomas and the Thin Clergyman soon heard giggling from the platform.
"Oh, he managed that very well." "Do you remember, Clarabelle, when Thomas lost our nice guard?" "Yes, I do." A little hiccup," stammered Thomas. "We soon got him back and all was well again." "Then there was the time you wanted to go fishing," the coaches giggled. "The water column was out of order, and Thomas was thirsty. So he took on water from the river and got some fish in his tanks." "Oh, really? Thomas, how funny." The Thin Clergyman laughed as he went to clean his glasses. Thomas felt embarrassed. "As I said, a small hiccup from a foolish young engine," he insisted grandly. "I soon settled down." "But not before you got stuck in the snow," said Annie. "It wouldn't have happened if you'd worn your snowplow," added Clarabelle. Thomas frowned. "It's heavy and uncomfortable, and I don't like it." It's a good thing Terence came to rescue you," tittered the coaches. "Terence?" asked the Thin Clergyman. "A tractor who lives along my branch line. He and I are good friends now." "Were you not always friends?" "No!"
chimed Annie and Clarabelle.
Thomas called Terence's caterpillar tracks ugly, but was sorry when he was freed.
You know you shouldn't judge your neighbours because of what they look like, don't you? Thomas went red in the face.
I do now. Like I said, Terence and I are good friends. It's the same with Bertie the bus.
Just then, the passengers came out of the station and began to board the train. A woman with 3 children came up to the thin clergyman.
Wilbert, it's time to go, dear.
All right, dear. You take the children to the coaches. He watched her go and then turned back to Thomas. Thank you very much for talking with me, he said. I'm sorry we didn't have time to finish your story, but I've loved hearing all about it. Thomas let off steam proudly.
You shall have to come back so I can finish my story properly, he said. It's always nice to know some people know how to speak to engines. Goodbye.
Thomas watched the thin clergyman hurry after his wife and children. He sighed happily. With a small peep on his whistle, he puffed out of the goods dock to collect Annie and Clarabelle. He was eagerly awaiting the next time he could speak to the thin clergyman, but between you and me, I think he was more excited to be in a book. And Thomas whistles, peep peep in return. So what did you think of that?
Wilbert must have a very bad case of boiler sludge, because that sounded nothing like what I told him.
I don't know. It sounded rather accurate to me.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you have to admit that you were less experienced back then. Yes, but surely Wilbert could have included some of my more flattering adventures in it. Maybe so, but it was still a nice jumping-off point for you. Pah! Who needs a book as a jumping-off point when I already run the most important part of the railway? No, Thomas. I mean, it just shows how much you've changed since then. You're not the same engine that wanted to see the world. You've become so much more than that, and I'm so glad I've been able to see you become the engine you are right now. Thank you, Edward. No problem, Thomas. Still, I feel Wilbert should have written something more in line with what I told him. Oh, Thomas.